Welcome to the Ascend Growth AI podcast, where we mix smart growth moves with a little AI magic. I'm Teresa. Let's dive in. For today's guests, we have Darren Engle, COO of Stratos Jets. Darren helped pioneer the first ever franchise model in private aviation, bringing both tech-forward thinking and deep operational insight into an industry that has traditionally resisted franchising. So Darren, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
How about we start by having you share your journey with us?
Sure. So I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I also have an MBA. Started out designing and developing combustion turbine engines, working at Siemens Energy. And after about 5 years of that, I decided to venture out on my own and start my very first company. It was a technology company with the focus around energy systems. I acquired a patent on a compressorless microgas turbine. So the idea was to build mechanical batteries that would be integrated into portable electronic devices. I quickly learned that through the capital raising journey, that sometimes you aren't able to acquire all the capital you need to build, especially a technology that is physical in nature, right? Like an actual product. And so back in 2006, a lot of the investment was being made into SaaS products and app-based products that didn't require hardware. So hardware investments were very difficult to raise capital for. Ended up pivoting, and that company turned into an engineering services company. And I grew that for over a decade. Ended up selling that and getting into fiber optic sensing for industrial applications. And so the journey, so long story long, I've been involved in high growth technology centric organizations that are focused primarily on industrial and commercial applications. And so fast forwarding to where I'm at now, I was on the board for Stratos Jets. It was Stratos Jet Charters, Inc. And about 5 years ago. And a good friend of mine, who's also the founder and CEO of Stratos Jets, conversationally asked me to look at the industry and to help ideate on ways to impact the industry in a way that was better aligned with his mission and vision for the industry. And so we ideated and we discussed different paths that were possible. And we ended up landing on franchising, which is very interesting because that business model has never been deployed in private aviation. And so we had to talk through that and kind of figure out what that looked like operationally from a pivot. And and here we are today.
Wow, that's amazing. What a journey. What a unique journey. So that's great. Thank you for sharing. And what does Stratos Jets do?
We're a private jet charter company that brokers flights for clients. We don't own or operate any aircraft. We just represent them and help source aircraft that meets their mission. This business is very relationship driven. And so understanding the need and the mission of a client and providing them with a market analysis and options that best meet their needs is what brokering flights is all about in the private charter world.
And you mentioned the CEO's mission and vision. What was that for aviation?
His vision was to really elevate the industry with the focus on safety and customer experience. The reason for that is over the past 2 decades, there's been fragmentation in the industry. Brokerages grew very large. Agents that represented them, so private flight advisors, they branched off and left and started their own jet charter brokerages, independently owned and operated, and so on and so forth. So if you look historically, there's a lot of stemming from a few big players early on, a lot of the jet charter brokerages within the industry that are maybe the top 5, those individuals are still within the industry. It hasn't been consolidated, let's put it that way. So over time, through the fragmentation, these brokerages these small independently owned brokerages have had to compete against one another. And we're seeing more recently within the past 24 months, there's been a movement to talk about private aviation as a commoditized business. And I believe that primarily the reason that's being discussed that way is because these small independent brokerages don't really have anything else to differentiate their service offerings from one of their competitors, right? Because They're small, they don't have the resources of a large organization. And as such, they're really primarily competing on price. So if a client is looking to fly privately is asking two of these smaller jet charter brokerages to quote them, it's really hard to distinguish the services they can provide over someone else, because ultimately they're flying from A to B privately. So if you can meet that basic need, then the services have been rendered. But that's just where it starts. And so, that's where the reason when we pivoted operationally, Joel built out a proprietary technology that's a booking platform that's really end to end. And through the pivot, we became a technology first company that's driven on relationships and industry safety. But the idea is that through creating an ownership model via franchising, we're able to empower the independently owned and operated jet charter brokerage with the ability to book flights through our platform and get all of the support financially as well as operationally that they need to really scale and grow and be successful. And all of the services that we're providing that allows them to differentiate themselves. And so there's two paths for someone in the industry right now that they can pursue if they want to take the next step forward in their career, whether that is, the two options are, I either leave my current, one, I guess there's maybe three options. One, they can get promoted internally. That's a great option. But if they're already kind of at their ceiling, the only other two options is either leave and do a parallel shift, and hopefully there's more opportunity in the next brokerage that they work for, or start their own jet charter brokerage and build something that they can create enterprise value and own over time. Our model really comes into play when that individual is looking at a career change and future opportunity, not only for themselves, but also for their career.
That makes sense. Is it hard to get into the industry without experience?
Historically, yes. That's what's led to the fragmentation. So historically, you had to have a lot of industry knowledge of how the industry works. There's really three primary bodies that govern a transaction, right? There's the client seeking services, right? Flying privately from A to B. There's the air carrier, which is the actual entity that owns and or operates the aircraft. And then there's the brokers, the ones that are actually connecting the client to an air carrier. But the reason that a broker is needed to represent the client is that they're shopping the entire market, doing a market analysis, understanding the different options, different classes of aircraft. They're advocating for the client for safety standards as well as operational history. And these things are all governed under Part 135, and there's other regulatory and third-party sanctioning bodies around safety that exist in the industry. But if you don't have experience flying privately, then you would lean on your broker to really facilitate that understanding and transaction for you on your behalf.
Wow, that's really interesting. Now, who is your ideal customer from one, looking for new franchisees, and then two, the ideal customer for the franchisee themselves?
Yeah. So within this industry, like I was saying before, it's relationship driven. And so part of the pivot was, the reason we just didn't pivot and be just a technology company and provide the platform as a SaaS product, is that we really wanted to be able to have the ability to have our mission and vision lived out through others, that other like-minded individuals that wanted to build a very reputable jet charter brokerage. And so in doing so, and franchising made the most sense respectively. And because of that, the types of people that we're looking for are those that want to represent the client in a way that best has their best interests first. And we want people that want to not only make money, but provide a level of service that is bespoke. And this model allows them to do that. Historically, they wouldn't be able to do that on their own, just because of as any entrepreneur or young business owner knows, there's a lot of time spent on non-revenue generating activities when you launch your company. And there's fixed costs that have to be met at the end of every month. And cash flow is the primary driver behind staying liquid, staying afloat. All right. And if you don't have these things met, or the capital means to have the wherewithal to handle any type of environmental conditions that may occur, it's likely that you may fail. And so with our model being purely performance-based, we've kind of eliminated or at least reduced the risk that an agency owner, which is a franchisee, would have as an independently owned brokerage, which is something that it's a unique model that, as we were modeling it, was very important for us because we wanted to make sure that the franchisee didn't focus primarily on generating revenue above all other things. And that was really something that was important to us.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's good. And I guess the way that you've set up your franchise, do a lot of other franchises do it performance based?
I don't know. Looking at looking at franchising as a whole, I've been in business a very long time, and I've wore many executive level hats from CEO, COO, and even CFO. And I've helped companies grow from being bootstrapped to being a multi-million-dollar company, and I've helped multi-million-dollar companies grow to being almost $1 billion. So I've been able to experience growth in numerous environments, whether it's product centric or service based. And I have not really, there are performance models out there, obviously, that are like, say, commission based. But those are primarily more of the job type franchises. There's like the 5 different types of franchises. So you have, job franchise, product franchise, you have like a business franchise, you have investment franchise, and conversion franchise. I believe those are the 5 types. Very generalized. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but ours, kind of what we are doing as well, is under business and conversion. Okay. So if you're an independently owned and operated jet charter brokerage already, right, and say you do $1 to $5 million a year, but you're just struggling, you're struggling to make it to the next level, and you're taking a lot of risks financially. You want to grow your company, but at the same time, you have to maintain liquidity, and you're risking a lot. And in this industry, flights are very expensive. So, if you book, and the average flight is about $20,000 to $25,000, you book 5 flights in one day, you have to secure those flights with an air carrier until the money that is received from your client has been converted from a cash cycle perspective, right? So you could go 30 days, you could book 5 flights in a month and have $100,000 outstanding until the money's received from your clients. And then the margin is it ranges between 10 to 15% on a flight. And that's on average. Sometimes you'll do a flight at cost because you're trying to deepen relationships with your client. And you know that if you really deepen that relationship and you do what's right, they'll probably fly a few more times with you that year. You're really looking at LTV associated with that client and their life cycle. So it's really the value that you're getting by owning a franchise.
Wow. That's so different. So I know you did a lot of research when you were coming up with this. And when we first talked, you mentioned that many entrepreneurs jump into franchising without really understanding the model. What are key things that someone should look at before they invest in a franchise?
Yeah. So as I was saying before, like historically, I've never really been involved in a franchising operating model, and let alone helped an organization pivot from being a service model to that of a product-based model selling franchises. So taking an operationalized model and pivoting it to being a franchise model that's product-centric, I've never really done before. And so we worked with some consultants and franchise attorneys. Now I'd say I probably have enough knowledge to make myself dangerous. I won't consider myself an expert. But there are a lot of things as we were developing this model that historical understanding, I think, really allowed us to be creative and do things that weren't traditional. And as we were going through the process of developing our FDD and working with franchise consultants as well as franchise attorneys, we realized the uniqueness of our model. And so as we were explaining it to them, and they were trying to put us in a box. And then so from a model perspective, we had to explain like, okay, here is our fee structure. And we wanted to create a win-win model that's performance-based. So if an agency doesn't book any flights or that they don't owe us any money, and as such, we don't make any money, we want our success to be tied with their success. And that was quite unique from what I understood in the franchising space, especially when you get down to item 5, 6, and 7 on the FDD, which is kind of your initial fee structure, other fees, and your initial investment that you have to make. And going through that, we had to set our franchise fee such that since we had no other costs associated, So if you were interested in independently owning and operating your own jet charter brokerage and you were considering a Stratos Jets franchise, you would look through the FDD and realize like, wow, okay, I have to pay a fee that seems higher than other franchise fees. Well, that's true. But there are no other fees you have to pay other than our franchise fees. Unlike a lot of traditional franchises, especially brick and mortar, where you're like, okay, I'll spend $50,000 on the franchise fee or $100K on the franchise fee. But then you have another million to $1.5 million in build out costs. You have all the time it takes to actually build out your facility and do all the proper branding and corporate training for your employees. And that's all that time it takes is time that you're not making money. And so that opportunity cost associated with the time it takes to get up and running, it was very interesting. Our model is such that you're up and running within 30 days and you have one fee you pay up front. And we do offer internal financing to help people out. You pay a fee up front and that's it. You're onboarded and trained within 30 days. You have access to C-suite for any questions and to help strategize. We provide you with your communication environment, which we're using Slack for that. We provide you access to FMS, which is our platform, which all transactions are performed through. It's end-to-end. Our team's working in there. It's built on top of the Salesforce architecture, which is really great. So from a data security perspective, we have the best CRM in the world, right? And so we've tried to do everything we possibly could to make it cost effective as well as beneficial to someone coming on board, especially when you're looking at it from a cash flow perspective. Because a lot of young entrepreneurs, they're taking a loan out that has to be paid back, but they may not make a dollar until 8 months later after signing a franchise agreement. That's a long time for a young company, a new business owner, to have to wait to make a dollar.
The fact that you're up in 30 days, I haven't seen that before, so that's amazing.
Well, the great thing about that is our model is we don't require you to have any retail space, right? You can if you'd like, you can have office space, but because of the nature of the business where it's global and clients can reside anywhere, there's no regions or geographical territories you have to comply with. So that's the other really great thing about our model is you're not having to go and buy territories or align on geographical requirements associated with where you want to open a franchise. There are restrictions associated if you're trying to get into an existing franchise and you may want to be in a certain market that may not be open to you because someone else has already locked that down. Even if that franchise isn't even existing in some of the spaces that you would open, they've already bought the territory or the region, geographical region. And so it's like they own that territory, which is something that I'm like, well, that's what I love about our model is that if you have a laptop and a cell phone and you're able to build high performance teams and you understand sales and marketing and your relationship forward, then you can have a successful jet charter brokerage.
That's great. And because I was looking at your website, at least the Stratos Jets website, if someone goes in, if there's no territories, if someone goes in and wants to do something, how do you know which franchisee to assign it to?
It's up to the client, right? Everything that is done is based on the client making the decision. So how our platform is built such that a client is trying to shop other franchisees under the same Stratos brand, our system won't allow that. It restricts that. So it stops cannibalism under the Stratos flag, if you will, right? So any agency owner, the beautiful thing about being a Stratos Jets agency is that a client, they can shop Stratos Jets and they can shop other brokerages. But if they decide they're going to work with a Stratos Jets agency to book their flight, they can only select one agency to have them quote the flight. If I owned an agency and you owned an agency and a client contacted both of us and we had no idea and they're like, hey, I'd like you to quote this flight, we're not essentially bidding against one another and driving the cost down. We're already going to provide a competitive cost because we're doing a full market analysis and providing that to a client. And that client is getting the benefit of having access to any Part 135 aircraft as long as they have gone through our approved vendor program. But we have all Part 135s, all tails in our database. So a lot of private flyers, if they're going direct through an air carrier, they're only being locked into their fleet. So the beautiful thing about using a broker is that you're not being locked into a fleet because a broker doesn't own or operate aircraft. Now, you can have some operators that also have a brokering arm to their operation, and they can go outside of their fleet, but they're heavily incentivized to push all of the clients to their fleet first before looking for aircraft outside their fleet. I always feel like that's not ideal in your best interest as a client, right? Because there may be a cheaper flight on a plane that is probably better suited, or maybe a newer aircraft, better routing that is more beneficial to me, but you have interest in driving it directly to your fleet before going out and doing analysis that way. So a lot of the jet cards and jet memberships out there, that ends up happening more than not. And it makes sense if you own your own aircraft fleet and you have a brokering side to your business, and people contacted you, you'd first try to facilitate their needs on your aircraft.
What's working well in Stratos Jets right now? What are you proud of?
Well, I'm proud of the model, right? What the model represents, right? Us being the first to franchise a jet charter brokerage, that could have only happened with a very strong company, strong brand within the industry. And Joel spent almost 2 decades building just that, his credibility as well as the brand. In this industry, that means a lot. There's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of people that just leave and do things that aren't fully compliant, and they get a bad name for themselves within the industry. Joel has been above board and has set standards that have been higher than even what the FAA and third-party safety organizations have set as standards. And he's very proud of that. And, he's built a very successful business on that. And this new Stratos Jets, like 2.0, where we're moving forward, we're doing just that as well. But now we're able to do that through all of our agencies and the collective network of our agencies. And that buying power allows a small, and the reason that this is important is that us being a platform and just a small brokerage interacting with that platform doesn't really give them any leverage in the industry. But if you own your own Stratos Jets agency, right, you're still have your own independent brand tied to a very reputable brand within the industry, and you're getting the collective buying power of the whole, right, and the relationships of the whole parent entity. And so we're able to, through the processing, tens of millions of dollars on an annualized basis through our platform, and we work with air carriers. And so corporately, we handle the financial transaction and we provide all the operational support, all of the flight coordination and flight following on behalf of all of our agencies. We do that on a flight by flight basis, right?
That's
so
nice.
Our idea is that you're focused on the relationships and booking flights, and then our team is here to work for you to handle the financial transactions, securing the asset with the air carrier, and supporting the end-to-end your client's journey, right? And so that allows you to be more effective at being relationally with them and building relationships and booking more flights, and allows us to handle a lot of the workload that's really non-revenue generating. It comes down to experience, so customer experience, and we want to be able to give that. So we do that through a centralized body corporately. So all of our agencies that are booking flights, our team has more expertise in flight coordination and flight following than any one of them individually. It's the total sum. And that's very powerful. And that's something that if you independently owned and operated your own brokerage, you wouldn't have those resources. You won't have the risk diversion in terms of mitigation by only having to pay for services and technology and support on a flight by flight basis. You wouldn't be able to have that, right? You'd have commitments to different tools and software, and you'd have access to different platforms. And so these are all like annualized commitments that you're making that ultimately turn into fixed costs, right? OpEx. So I'm proud of the ability we've seen to date. We pivoted the company, started the operational pivot in 2024, and we did with a soft launch in Q4 of 2024, because we had to do some, there were some platform changes we had to make to create these individual silos for the agency portals, right? To protect every one of our agencies' data from other agencies seeing that. And so we had to add one layer within our existing platform. It took us about 8 months to be able to do that, to beta test it, to prove it out, and did the soft launch in Q4 of 2024. Since the hard launch in 2025, we've already onboarded, we're up to our 12th agency that we've onboarded. So our 12th franchise. And we're doing, next week we have our August session, and we're onboarding 2 more in that session. So we typically do onboarding sessions on a monthly basis, which is really exciting.
How do people find you, or how do you find your franchisees?
There's different marketing campaigns that we've done to generate interest and create leads. And so we've had hundreds of people inquire about the opportunity, but we're being highly selective. This isn't going back to Joel's mission and vision and what I was saying before about us partnering with the right people, right, to sell an agency to. Our goal isn't like a lot of franchises, their goal is to sell a lot of franchises, right? That's how they're going to make money, and that's what they do. Our goal isn't to sell a lot of franchises. Our goal is to sell franchises to individuals that will be great brand ambassadors for Stratos Jets and having agency owners that are doing the right thing in the industry. So we're being very selective. But it also, part of this model is that we're no longer just locked into the industry, right? This creates a pathway for people that are entrepreneurs outside of the industry that are looking to break into private aviation. For the first time, they're able to do that, right? Because before, like as you were mentioning, they would have to have a lot of industry experience. They wouldn't have that knowledge, and it would be a totally different business model for them if they wanted to, say, venture out into creating another revenue stream within the private jet chartering world. Now you can have very businesses that complement one another, such as, say, family offices that are already working with ultra high net worth individuals. They could easily buy a franchise and create new service offerings to those that are already members of their office. And now they have a way to provide a better experience for those that can leverage that service. And because relationally, they already own those relationships. And they can also create another revenue stream for themselves, so revenue diversification. And they create a pathway for potentially new flyers to enter into their family office. So it's a great way for them to market their family office services that they could provide to someone that would meet the ultra high net worth or high net worth individual that is the proper demographic for someone that flies privately. So, and then you look at other ones like, say, sports agents and talent agents that already represent people that fly privately. They could easily say, hey, I'm your one-stop shop. Contact my office and we'll charter your flight, go through my office. And before this model, that would not have been easy because there's lots of things that go into lots of regulatory compliances that you have to meet and understand. There's FET collection and remittance, and like there's a lot that goes on. But our system and our team does that as a service we provide to you on a flight-by-flight basis, so you don't have to worry about any of that.
Wow. I never thought about those synergies before, so that's pretty interesting. Where do you want Stratos Jets to be 6 to 12 months from now?
I think that just continuing to impact the industry in a positive way with this idea of being advocates for our agency owners. So small, independently owned and operated jet charter brokerages, we're advocates for them within the industry. Due to the fragmentation, you've had a lot of bad actors because they're trying to maximize profits. They would say if an air carrier had a cancellation term that was, say, 24 hours, they would keep shopping the flight until 24 hours. If they found something that maybe had more margin in it for them, they would cancel last minute, not because of a true cancellation, not because of like, oh, my client had to cancel, something came up, there was a family emergency, sorry, have to cancel. And the air carrier is like, okay, understood, here's 100% of the money back. Instead of doing that, they were canceling, and because they could make an extra couple $100 over here if they use this other air carrier. Well, now air carriers are like, well, that, we're taking an asset out of market for you based on that scheduling, and then you cancel, and now we're stuck with a plane that hasn't flown that we have to make money on. So now they're changing their cancellation terms, and you're starting to see like things that used to be 12, 48 hours. Now it's going to like 3 and even 5 days cancellation terms, which isn't beneficial for the client when they actually do have an emergency. So us being advocates for them, now we can start saying, hey, listen, you work with us, change your cancellation terms. Our team, our agency owners don't behave and act as the bottom half of the industry, right? We're elevating the industry from that perspective. And so we're able to, like, them on their own, they wouldn't be able to have that buying power or that negotiating power because maybe they only do $5 million annually on booked revenue. And that's, maybe they only book one flight a month or quarterly with an air carrier. So the air carrier is not going to change their cancellation terms for one flight, a quarter. That's no big deal. But because Stratos as a whole, all of our agencies combined, say we're doing 100 flights a quarter or a month with an air carrier, now that's impactful, and that's something that they would, potentially consider do. And that's why I'm talking about advocacy. It's the same thing with leveling up everyone and saying that if we require these for PIC and SIC, so pilot in command, second in command, their hours on, we call it time and type, so their number of hours on a specific type of aircraft. We want them to be very capable pilots. So even if you have a lot of time on a type of aircraft, you might not have that on another aircraft. And so it's different types of aircrafts require different types of certifications, and we just want to make sure that the pilot that's flying our clients, they are the best of the best. And so we're advocates for that and making sure that the time and type is met. And so these are things that our team is doing and what we are pushing the industry to level up.
That's good. And to the earlier point, I mean, I can't imagine someone who'd want to do this on their own who doesn't have experience. That would be impossible. So it's really making a path for people who are not traditionally in the aviation.
It's tough. It really is. And that's why historically, you'd have to, in order to even get in this industry, you'd have to know someone that owned a jet charter brokerage. They'd have to give you a chance. You'd come in kind of as an intern and start learning, just start learning. And the material wasn't centralized. It wasn't like there's a book you can read to understand who to call, what to do. You had to really shadow someone and learn from them. Part of what we do with our platform is we have a central document repository and AI we've developed that's really just an LLM that indexes off of our document repository as well as any other websites that has pertinent information that's relevant to private aviation. We pull all that stuff together so that in a chat-based environment, all of our agency owners and their agents have access to this knowledge. And so they can query it at any point in time. What is the pet policy for Stratos Jets? What is the policy for a minor traveling with one parent internationally? There's a lot of things that you would have to learn over time from someone. Day one, you coming in, you have access to all the documents you can read, and we actually require that through testing before part of your onboarding process. You understand our policies, processes, take a test, and become essentially certified to be competent in actually selling private charter. But you have access to a database of information that can take even a good agent and make them exceptional. Someone that has knowledge in the industry going through our training program internally, they would become an exceptional agent within the industry. And so you have all that as part of that. And so if you stepped out and decided, hey, I had all this knowledge I've learned through my career, and now I'm going to start my own brokerage, you still may not have all that knowledge that's been acquired. Joel's assembled this over the last 20 years, so it's amazing.
That is amazing. I can see why a lot of people are asking joining. What would you tell your younger self to do differently if you were to start over again?
I would say just enjoy the journey. It's not a sprint, especially being an entrepreneur. It's tough when you start your first company and you feel like you're on an island all alone because you don't really have colleagues or cohorts anymore, that you can talk to around the coffee pot or just by walking around the office. You're really all by yourself. And if you're hiring employees or other team members, you don't really want to talk to them strategically about what's going on because you may create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so what do? And it's like, well, having a mentor will help, or going and trying to build relationships with industry professionals like attorneys and accountants that you can talk to, but they're so specialized, right? And it's a hard thing. It's a lonely world out there. And I would just say that understand that, don't invite it, seek out the mentorship immediately so you don't feel like you're on an island alone. You can have those strategic conversations, develop relationships with attorneys and accountants and other people that can help you and advise you and direct you, and just enjoy the journey because you're going to look back and 10 years it's gone by. And the reality is you could be doing anything, but you chose to do what you're doing.
That's really good advice. Thank you. And if people wanted to get in touch with you or learn more, where can they go?
They can just go to our website, stratosjets.com, or they could just email me directly at darren@stratosjets.com.
Well, Darren, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I learned a ton today, so thank you for sharing everything. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you got value, share it, tag us, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Catch you next time on the Ascend Growth AI podcast.